This hospital's owned and managed by NHS Lothian. I work for NHS Lothian as Green Health Programme Manager, and we were really pleased that SEDA and the Astley Ainslie Community Trust wanted to feature this site as part of their Health and Wellbeing programme.
Thanks everyone. Marsh Pool. In the woods 3 suns shine, the true one split in 2 by a pine trunk, blazing either side of this. The whole sun's reflected in another angle, glancing up from the marsh pool, a sun on the same level as you, in a tinier forest of sphagnum moss and fern that brinks the water. Liquid image of the world, lain down complete with treetops. 3 suns shine, none of them the true one, a portion or a version, but there's comfort in seeing the sun doubling itself by touching the light of fire to water, as a candle lights a candle in the darkness. Your life blooms in your skull. You are a candle. The flame dances in you even when you turn and seem to shut the light off, or you take a different path, streak off a comet. Once meeting, we are never apart. We are never unknown, though we try to unknow ourselves. There is no hiding from what you were, from what is your true nature. To be a vessel, you are like water that can't help but reflect the fiery sun above it, and your life a string on which new wax gathers, ready for the night's fall. Always the light in your window spells out that you're familiar.
Well, no, you've got beach. Yeah, that one, yes. Okay, beach. Right, so we've got beach. This one here is Sycamore Acer pseudoplatanus. It's the most common tree on this site, as described in those notes there. Sycamore, is it native to Scotland? Do you think? Sorry? No, it's naturalised. We need much fewer of them. We've got over 1 million deer.
It's not a moss. There are a few mosses on here.
Fungus.
A fungus? A fungus. It's not just, it is a fungus, but not just a fungus. Exactly. Yes.
What did you say?
A lichen is actually a combination of a fungus and an alga in a relationship called symbiosis. And recently people have discovered that actually there are other things inside lichens as well, including things like yeast and bacteria.
SCOBY, when you're making kombucha.
That's another sort of symbiosis. Yes, SCOBY stands for symbiotic community of
yeast, of bacteria and yeast.
Yes. So that's sort of an artificial one in a way. But so there are tens of thousands of species of this worldwide, and they have these really strange and very fascinating shapes. Trees are pollinated by wind. Lime isn't, it's pollinated by insects.
Honeybees love it.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. And that's an interesting thing. And it used to be thought that if you just left Britain alone, removed all the people, removed all the cows and things, that basically what you'd get is an oak wood. But research done in East Anglia looked at the pollen record. So pollen grains are very resistant to rot. They fall into the soil, they fall into ponds and into peat bogs and things, and they're preserved. So you can hoik them out with a core. You can work out sort of when it was laid down. You look at them under a microscope and identify which species are present. And people did this and they found lots of oak pollen and not much, for example, lime. But a guy called Oliver Rackham, who some of you may know of, he wrote some wonderful books, died a few years ago now, did research on this, and he came to the conclusion that actually, at least in that part of East Anglia, the forest, if you just left things alone, would not be oak, it would be lime. And that the record, the pollen record, had to be, you had to, somebody's serenading us, you had to allow for the fact that insect pollinated flowers, such as these, don't produce as much pollen as wind pollinated things. So oaks are wind pollinated, so they, if you get hay fever, you'll know this, there's pollen everywhere, right? Whereas this only produces enough pollen to stick onto a bee that's going to carry it to another flower, so it's much more efficient. It doesn't actually disperse its pollen into the air, it has insects carry it for it. And so if you're going to use the amount of pollen as a way of measuring how much of a plant there was way back when, using what's deposited in peat bogs and things, you have to allow for that. When you do that, the picture changed completely. And what Oliver Rackham reckoned is that these trees actually cast deep shade. They live a very long time, so do oaks, and they would probably, on the soils of East Anglia anyway, be the dominant tree. That's no longer the case in East Anglia, and the reason is because they grow on very fertile soils, and those soils were the first to be cleared for agriculture. I think the limes in this part of Scotland anyway are almost all planted, or the descendants of planted ones, because they like warmer conditions, and it is getting warmer, so they, you know, but plants will often grow somewhere, if you plant them, as in your garden, where they wouldn't grow naturally if you didn't protect them from, well, all the things that you protect things from in gardens, you know, slugs and snails and other plants crowding around and shading them out. So I think this is the only species in this area, and this will be native, and not necessarily this particular tree, somebody may have planted it, but the species is native, and as you can see, it's quite successfully reproducing. So this is a process called succession. So people talk about wilding, everybody goes on about wilding and rewilding these days, and all it really means is leaving things, or in my opinion what it should mean, is you leave things alone and let nature take its course. And if you do that in the absence of invasive plants, which could take over, then that is to say non-native things that are very aggressive, this would grow up into an oak wood. So remember what I was saying about in East Anglia, the idea was it would be an oak wood, but then the research suggested it was perhaps lime. Up here I think it would definitely be oak wood, and further north it might be Caledonian pine, Scots pine. And in the botanics there's a little grove of these, about the same size. I would say this is possibly bigger than this, but anyway, and there's one more through there somewhere, and it has, you can see these in the mountains of California. They're still there, although they're suffering now, and but they grow brilliantly in Scotland. If you go over to Argyll, you'll see there's a grove of them in Benmore, the botanic garden at Benmore, and this is a baby, right? These trees live for 2,000 or 3,000 years. It's difficult to imagine that, isn't it? 2,000 or 3,000 years. So if this one is, it won't be older than 175 years. It might be a bit younger than that. I mean, look at it. It's just, I'm not sure if it started to produce cones yet. It probably has. But for a tree this size, you'd think it would produce massive, great cones, wouldn't you? But actually, they're about the size of my fingernail. And it has this lovely soft bark. If you come and feel it, right? I mean, so that tree there, that's a cedar, and it's like most trees, it's got a really hard bark. But you compare it with this one, and it's soft and it's really thick. And it actually has a function in its native forest. This actually protects the trunk of the tree from fire. So if you see it growing in the wild, in California, you often see there are great big triangular burnt marks in the trunk. But the rest of the tree has not burned. And then that can sort of heal over it. It doesn't kill the tree. And those forests do burn. Trees can only live 2,000 or 3,000 years in a flammable forest if they are protected like this. Of course, it will destroy the small trees, right? But if you live 2,000 or 3,000 years, how often do your babies have to survive for the forest to continue?
There's different levels of knowledge about kind of how we deal with trees on the estate. So what that means basically is any work on any of the trees on site needs planning permission before any work can take place, unless it's an absolute emergency. And even then you've still got to go back and apply for planning permission retrospectively. Started was, well, we can't not maintain it because it's closing down. We've got this green space asset, and if you don't maintain it, actually then it becomes a liability rather than an asset. So we need to be more proactive in terms of maintenance of it, and that's why we developed the green space management plan. And in the green space management plan, we've got a lot of amenity grassland just getting gang mown again and again and again. So we're looking at how we can convert this to meadow, relaxed grassland, wet meadow for the different types of more species-rich habitats in the right places. But that'll also be changed as well, and some people won't like that, so we've got to manage that properly. So the area of lawn in front of you there is one of the areas that we'll be looking to convert into wildflower meadow later this year. With the grounds and gardens team. And again, it's about, a lot of this is all about people. It's about how you bring people on that journey of change. So there's no point doing it if our grounds and gardens teams, our maintenance teams can't maintain it if they don't have the right equipment, skills and capabilities to do it. So we're bringing people on a journey with us to do that. So we're going to go down to the pet cemetery. During the Black Death and the Plague, they needed a place for people to recuperate, and they were coming from the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh, so the Astley Ainslie was established. And I think they bought several villas, so you see the old villas behind us like St. Roch's, so they bought several villas together into one hospital grounds, and that's why you've got this kind of remnants of design landscape. So this area's got some quite, they're not formal gardens are they, but you can see the rhododendron and different types of landscaping through it, and that's kind of why we've got this huge kind of green area in the central of Morningside, because it was all those areas brought together. And you get strange things like this, like the pet cemetery. So I don't know how many hospitals have got pet cemeteries in them. Probably, I'm going to say more than you'd think. So, and it's interesting, like the use of pets in healthcare as well is actually quite well established. So I don't know if anyone's come across theraponies and theradogs. So a charity that I work for also funds therapets going into wards. So there's just nothing cuter than a little pony turning up in a ward.